Hi everybody, my name is Hakan and today we'll be discussing request validation with minimal APIs in ASP.NET Core. So I've got this simple books API set up using a vertical slice architecture approach where my slices contain my request DTOs, the endpoint, and the respective handler. I've got a slice for creating, deleting, getting, and updating books. I'll show you how it works. I'll start the API. So the API started, and if I try to get some books, I'll get an empty collection because there are no books in the database. I can send a post request for creating a list of books. So if I send this, I get a tool1 created. After that, if I try to get again, I get a list of created books. Right now, the creation has no validation inside of the endpoint. So if I try to create a book with an invalid ISBN, I get a 500 internal server error. Instead, I would like to have a 400 batch request where there's actual validation before the processing in the endpoint. So since .NET 7, we have filters in minimal API. Before the request hits our endpoint, it goes through the filters. So what we can do is create a filter that does the validation for us. And if the request is not valid, it will short circuit and right away return a 400 batch request. And if it is valid, then only then we will allow it to go through our endpoint and do the necessary processing. So I'll be using FluentValidation for my validators. So I'll be starting by installing the packages called FluentValidation and the FluentValidation dependency injection. Okay, then I'll register those right away, saying builder.service.add validators containing program. Then inside of my filters folder, I'll create a validation filter class, which inherits from endpoint filter. This class will be generic, and it will inject a validator of type T. Let's create a field. Then inside of this invoke async, we can get the request by saying for request is context.arguments.of type T dot first. Then we can validate that request, saying for result is await validator.validate async request. Let's make this method async. Then we can return based on if the result is valid or not. We'll say result.isValid. If it is valid, then return the next invocation. And if it is not valid, return results.validation problem. And inside of it, the errors of the result. So this validation filter class, we can use this class to add it as a filter to our minimal API endpoints. First, I'll be creating a validator inside of my slice. So for the create books request, I can say public class validator of abstract validator for create book requests, which is an array of requests. Then I can say inside of the constructor, I can say rule for each books.child rules, where each book should have a set of rules. The first rule is for the title. So a title should not be empty. The same is for the author and also for the ISBN. But the ISBN needs some extra validation because an ISBN should be a 13-digit numeric value. So we'll say it should have an exact length of 13 and it should all be digits. So we'll say isbn.all jar.isDigit with message saying ISBN should be a 13-digit numeric value. Also want to check for duplicates in the request because the ISBN column in the database is a unique index or has a unique index. So if I insert multiple ISBNs with the same value, it will throw errors. So what I can do is say rule for books dot must books, and then I'll be using a hash set, saying for set is new hash set of type string. Then I'll say return books.all set.add book.isbn. So this will check whether it contains duplicate ISBNs or not. Say with message request must contain unique ISBNs. So that should work. Then next, by our endpoint, we can add our filter by saying add filter, add endpoint filter of type validation filter. And validation filter takes a request type. So here we can say CreateBookRequests array. We can do the same for our update book, which only has a request to change the title and the author. So we can say public class validator of type abstract validator, update book request, say ctor. Then I'll just copy these two, paste them in here, delete this part. Okay. Then I can say after the put, I can say add endpoint filter of type validation filter for update request. So that should work. Let's test our API. If I try and send the same request right now, instead of a 500, I should get a 400 status code. So there it is. The ISBN is not valid. Also, if I delete the title, it will give me errors about the title. And the same for if I add the same book, it should complain about the ISBNs not being unique. Request must contain unique ISBNs. And if it is all right, I'll get a tool one created. And after that, I can get the book by its ISBN. I can say ISBN is this book. That seems to be correct. So I can also update the book by taking this. I'll be pasting it in here. Remove this because we can only send a title and an author. And we'll say Harry Potter was here. Send it to for no content. If I send a invalid data, I get a 400 bad request. Title must not be empty. So that seems to be working. Right now the book should be updated. So if I search for the same book, it will say Harry Potter was here. I can also delete the book by saying ISBNs. It's this one. 204 no content. Try and get the book. I get an empty list. So we seem to have fixed that by using the endpoint filters and FluentValidation validators. So to summarize, we created a validation filter of type T that injects a validator of type T. And inside of the invoke async, we're validating the request. If this is valid, then we're invoking the next delegate in the pipeline. If it is not valid, we're short-circuiting and returning a 400 bad request. And our endpoints, we added the filters by using the add endpoint filter with our own filter type and the request type inside of that. So that was request validation with minimal APIs using endpoint filters and FluentValidation. Thanks for watching, keep building, see you next time.